Hi there, everyone. My name is Max Young, and on behalf of Vroman's Bookstore, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in tonight. Tonight, we are lucky to have with us Kate Stayman-London in conversation with Morgan Matson discussing Kate's book, One to Watch. Again, we're so grateful that you could join us and continue to support us during this really tough time. And if you'd like to support us more by buying Kate's book, you can go ahead and click the green button down here, which takes you right to our website with her book. Tonight's event also includes a Q&A down there and type a question that you'd like Kate to answer. So whichever one has the most votes is going to be answered first. And with that said, let me go ahead and introduce our two guests. So first off, Kate is a novelist, screenwriter, and political strategist. She served as the lead digital writer for Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign and has written for notable figures ranging from President Obama and Malala Yousafzai to Anna Wintour and Cher. While not writing or traveling, Kate can be found obsessively ranking Taylor Swift songs, laughing loudly with friends over really good bottles of wine, and of course, watching reality TV. And with her, Morgan was born in New York City and grew up there, as well as in Greenwich, Connecticut. She attended Occidental College, Yo Triumphi, as a theater major. yeah, Oxy major as well. But halfway through, she switched her focus to writing and never looked back. She received an MFA in writing for children from the New School, and then a second MFA in screenwriting from USC. She is the New York Times bestselling author of 5 books, all published by Simon & Schuster. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and let them take the screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Max.
Hi.
We're so happy you're here. We are going to discuss Kate's wonderful book, One to Watch, and other things that may be related to the book or not. Like, we need to talk about Taylor Swift at some point, obviously. But before we do that, I would love, Kate, if you could just give us a quick little summary about what One to Watch is about.
Sure. So One to Watch is about a devastatingly stylish plus-size blogger named B. Schumacher, who has her life turned upside down when she's asked to star in her favorite romance reality show, which in the book is called Main Squeeze, but it might remind you a little bit of The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. But there's one problem, which is that B is getting over a massively broken heart, and so she says yes to going on the show, but she absolutely refuses to fall in love. So the story follows her journey on the show and whether she can really stick to her guns once she meets the 25 men who've been handpicked to compete for her. So that is One to Watch.
It's so fun. I love this book so much. If you guys haven't read it, I highly encourage you to do it. You can purchase it right here where it says purchase One to Watch. It's so fun. It's so funny. It's so addictively readable. And I would just love to sort of start at the very beginning. And what was the inspiration for this, and where did it come from, and did it come all at once, or had this been percolating for a while?
So this was the beginning of 2017. And as mentioned, I had worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2015, 2016. And so I would not say I was in the most positive mental state at the end of 2016.
Why?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know. As you may remember, I was just sunshine and joyful and in a really good mood every time. But so I was thinking about what I wanted to write and kind of going back and forth with my literary agent about different ideas, and looking really for any kind of like joy or escape that I could find in my life at that time. And every Monday night I would do it by watching The Bachelor, which is one of my favorite shows. And it was Nick Viall's season. So it was the middle of March and I was
That means something to me. I know what that means.
I know, guys, this is proof you don't have to like The Bachelor to like the book. Morgan still likes the book.
Yes, I love the book.
So I was watching the season finale and it kind of hit me just like a bolt of thunder. Like, what would happen if a plus size woman were the star of a show like The Bachelorette? And it was such a simple premise, but I sort of found that the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't stop thinking about it. I stayed up until 2 a.m. writing my agent just like a quick little proposal that she read the next morning. She was like, "This is great, please go write it." I sat down that weekend and wrote the first chapter and we sold it 3 months later. So it was just like one of those things where once like the most simple premise came into my mind, it was just like the whole book kind of came from there.
That's amazing. I feel like on some books you can kind of tell how their gestation went. Like, I feel like you can sense that kind of excitement in the writing of this book. You know what I mean? Like the sort of energy and excitement and enthusiasm. I feel like you can feel that in the book. Like you were writing it to get these ideas down, and I feel like it's very propulsive. So I feel like it definitely came through.
Definitely. And like I had gone into the campaign with an idea that I was going to write a sort of like Bridget Jones on the campaign trail, political rom-com kind of idea. And when I tried to write that after the election, it was so, like, everything I wrote was so sad. And I was writing like 3 pages at a time. My agent was like, seems like you wrote 3 pages. We can't really sell that. And I was like, but once it was like, oh, I needed that joy of being able to go to a world where things were a little bit nicer than the world that we were in at the time.
Well, that was one of my questions, actually, that you have this political background, and then, but for your first book really doesn't, deal with the campaign trail or politics in that way, which you just kind of answered as to why. Do you think you'll ever write sort of a political rom-com book, or is that sort of something you want to keep a little separate?
I definitely think that I will. And actually the idea that I was working on is now being developed in a different medium. So that'll be something exciting to continue working on. But I think that everything I write is political kind of in its own way. So like One to Watch is a lot about fat phobia and beauty standards and misogyny in the media, and particularly the way the media treats powerful women and the way that men try to silence powerful women in the media. So I can't imagine how that would have been related to my time working for Hillary Clinton.
Weird.
So I think there are like tons of ways to be political, and it doesn't have to be about a campaign specifically in order to sort of be related to the ideology.
Yeah. I will say I do love the idea of you writing like a overtly political campaign focused like book. I feel like it seems like that's also missing. I feel like we get the dude version of that a lot. Like the dude take on being on the campaign trail and primary colors. And like, I feel like I would like to see that book from you at some point.
Totally. I think, as you know, when you're committing to write a book, you're committing to, 2 or 3 years of your life, and having just spent the previous 2 years of my life working on a campaign, that felt like a bridge too far at that particular moment. But hopefully at future moments might be a little more able to do it.
I love it. I was interested when I first read this book that it was in third person. Just because I feel like your voice is so strong. And if you had asked me, I don't know why you would have, it's a weird question to ask me, but if you were like, Morgan, if I wrote a book, would it be in first person or third person? I would have said first person, but no one goes around asking people that. Maybe they could. If someone had asked me that, I would have said, okay, it's going to write a first person book because your voice is so strong and so distinct. And I'm just interested in how you came to third, and was it always third? Did you think about first, and just kind of the process by which you came up with that?
Yeah, it was always third. I never wrote any. I think I probably did some like background writing of like monologues and characters' voices in first person to kind of get a sense of their voices. But this was always third. I think part of that was that I always knew were going to be the epistolary elements of sort of the text messages and emails and Slack chats and everything else. And so then the idea of having kind of a strong third person narrator who can kind of know things that B doesn't know every so often. And then also so much of B's journey in the book is that she's not the most self-aware person in the beginning of the book. And so having that freedom in the third person to be able to know a little bit more than she does, and maybe even poke a little fun at her at times, that gave me, I think, a lot more freedom in writing it, as opposed to sort of being stuck only in her mindset. I think would have been a little bit more limiting for me in the way I wanted to tell the story.
Totally. I mean, I happen to like first person, but I mean, third was fine, and you did a good job with it. But and I have to say, I love the extra textual elements. I think it's always such a fun addition to a book, and I feel like yours were extremely hilarious, and it just added so much more dimension to it. And I especially love the people watching the show, and I feel like it made the world seem so big, and just kind of gave us a real sense of how big this world is. Uh-oh. Am I back?
You're back. You're back. Okay. I can see you.
And so I've written some of those in books before, and they're fun, but they take so much time. What was your feeling about writing these? Did you enjoy them? How did you come to them, and what do you think of them?
Well, first of all, I should just say that if you enjoyed the epistolary style of my book, you should read Morgan's first book, Amy and Roger's Epic Detour, which is one of my very favorite books and which also uses a lot of those elements and which was something that I reread and looked to along with other books like Attachments by Rainbow Rowell and Where'd You Go, Bernadette? By Maria Semple. And so it's a style that I really love in books. And one of the things I really wanted to show in this book, it's so much about pop culture. And the way that we consume pop culture is it's not in a vacuum, right? Like when I sit down to watch The Bachelorette, I'm not just watching it on my couch for 2 hours and, you know, that's the beginning and end of the experience. I'm texting with my friends who watch it. I have been in those betting leagues and we do have Slack groups about them. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm reading articles. And so I really wanted readers of the book to have that experience that you're not just with B as she goes through sort of the experience of being on the show, but you're also kind of out here in the world with all these people and with the media and the Twitterverse and sort of thinking about how is the public experience of a set of events different than the private experience of that set of events. And that definitely also goes back to my experience on the campaign and feeling like, oh, suddenly I was at the center of this cultural phenomenon that so many people were paying attention to and saying things about and having opinions about. And often the opinions had absolutely nothing to do with my experience actually living through being on the campaign. And sort of that weird out of body experience of like, oh, I'm just sitting at my desk, but suddenly there's a photographer from Time magazine. I look really tired today. That picture is still on my grandmother's fridge. Like, you know, it was just like so strange. Like you're taking a picture of me. I ate Pop-Tarts for dinner last night. Why? So I wanted to capture the sort of weirdness of that from both sides of it.
Now I really want the time caption under the picture to be Kate Stayman-London, ate Pop-Tarts for dinner last night.
I mean, literally 4 nights a week, that would have been true. The 10th floor vending machine.
Okay, so I don't have anything against The Bachelor. I watched a couple seasons of The Bachelorette back in the day. I just, for whatever reason, have never gotten into it. I feel like the time is still right. At some point, you'll get me in. But let's talk about The Bachelor. First of all, what would your like ideal Bachelor date be? I don't want to say fantasy date because that means something else, I think, in the Bachelor world. But like, if you could have like a Bachelor style, like amazing planned out date, what would it be? And also where, when they travel places, where would you choose to go? I mean, right now it might be like literally like anywhere. You can't go anywhere.
Yeah,
but
I'd like to travel to New Zealand and I'd like a visa to remain there. That's
yes,
what
exactly.
I would like right now. Actually, New Zealand would be high on my list, as Morgan and I are both big fans of the Mission Impossible franchise, and there's this incredible sequence at the end of MI6 Fallout that takes place in New Zealand, and it's so beautiful, and they let you apparently do weird stuff on helicopters there.
They'll let you fly helicopters. New Zealand. What are you going to hit?
So I would just go to New Zealand and fly a helicopter. Like, that's true. That would actually be high on my list. It's always been my dream to go to Antarctica because my favorite book when I was a kid was Troubling a Star by Madeleine L'Engle, which takes place in Antarctica. So if The Bachelor wanted to foot the bill for me to have a romantic adventure where no one could see any part of anyone's body, it sounds great to me on a lot of levels. We'd just all be in like really big coats. But there's one date in the book where B and one of the men go to an empty museum, and
I was about to say, I think it's a museum. When I was reading it, even I was like, oh, this is Kate's like dream. Yeah,
totally. So it's LACMA in the book because it takes place in LA. But a favorite book when I was a kid was From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basiley Frankweiler, which I even referenced in that scene. But the idea of having the mat all to myself would be like the greatest dream. And it's also, for those reading, it's a Bill and Hillary Easter egg because their first date was at the Yale Art Museum, and there was like a student worker strike. And so there was a security guard at the front of the museum, and Bill Clinton said to the security guard, hey, if you'll let us in, we'll clean up all the trash that has piled up in the courtyard afterwards. The security guard was like, yeah, okay. So Bill and Hillary's first date was them by themselves at the Yale Art Museum looking at Roscoe, which is why Roscoe is referenced in that scene.
Oh, I love that. I feel like we should have picked up something from that. It's like, this guy's going to try and talk him way into things. I feel like it should have been just take note, America. Okay. If Chris Harrison and the powers that be sat down with you and said, how would you make the Bachelor/Bachelorette franchise better? What would you do?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, if this is a topic that you're interested in, I would encourage you to go to batchdiversity.com or follow at batchdiversity on Instagram. And I think maybe Twitter also. I follow them on Insta. They're great. They're doing a lot of work around anti-racism in the Bachelor franchise. And a lot is happening with that in terms of casting Black leads for the first time, except for Rachel Lindsay, but there's so much more that they need to do in terms of they have really leaned on tokenization and letting contestants of color be the people who speak out against racism. And it's like, no, the franchise needs to do that. So I think the franchise doing better vetting so that they're not consistently having people who said racist things and transphobic things on social media showing up on the show, and then the franchise not like saying that we don't agree with that and we think it's wrong when those things come to light again and again. That's a huge part of it. Also supporting contestants of color who are on the show, telling their stories in rich, non-stereotypical ways, casting leads who are open to dating people who are not the same race as them. So that I think is like some of the most important stuff they can do. And I think they also have a lot to do. They've made some real strides when it comes to LGBTQ inclusion. They had a same-sex proposal for the first time last summer on Bachelor in Paradise.
Well, that's exciting.
Like surprisingly emotional for me, but of course it was like two cis white blonde beautiful ladies who were like, as you know, whatever, but well, you know, it was a step in the right direction. But obviously in terms of body inclusion, they've done absolutely nothing, right? And there's really, you know, I think in the history of The Bachelor, there's been one plus size woman on the show, and she was a model and a size 10 and got sent home the first night. So it was like, okay, guys, we have more work to do here.
Come on.
So I think inclusion across the board. But I also think like one thing that I had a lot of fun with in writing the book was like people got to talk about politics and got to talk about like different pop culture and different topics that aren't kind of on The Bachelor. They're really only talking about sort of like their relationship histories and family tragedies. And like, I think the show would be more fun if we got to see people having more real conversations. So that sort of, aside from the diversity inclusion piece, I think that would be something I would suggest to them.
Well, I also feel like at some point it starts to become super unrealistic. It's like the world is happening and like, do you have feelings about it? Like, it's just, you know, yeah, I agree. So what?
Like Leslie Knope with turtles, no opinion.
So good. So good. How, like, I'd love to hear about your writing process in writing this book. And, you know, were there any surprises? Were there challenges? What your favorite part was, and kind of what this process was like for you?
Yeah, it was not the first time I'd ever written a novel, but it was the first time sort of knowing it was going to be published. So it was a different kind of pressure. And I would say that waiting until I was too terrified to miss my deadline was really a key part of the writing process.
Oh, yes. It has been for me for a decade. I found a really good way to avoid procrastination is have someone pay you half your money and then spend it and then know they're going to take it back.
Yeah, totally.
Really focuses the mind.
So having deadlines was super helpful. But also I did find that taking a little time off in between drafts was really useful to me, because I would have these like wonderful conversations with my editor. And then like taking a month or two to just sort of like let it sit and then diving back in was really, really helpful for me in terms of like all of a sudden things that I didn't know how I was going to solve. I was like, oh, this doesn't seem that complicated to me once I had just given it some time. In terms of what surprised me, I mean, I started out thinking this was going to be like this joyful escape from the world. And then I think it was the second or third draft that I turned in, that there's in the first chapter, there's this unsent email that B has written to the man who broke her heart. And she is just like pouring her heart out, and it's so emotional. And I like was sobbing when I wrote it. Like it was really tough to write. And my editor was like, this is my favorite thing in the entire draft. I'd like you to do a lot more stuff like this. And I was like, oh, you want me to do more of the stuff where I'm crying in my bedroom at 2:00 in the morning writing? Great, I'll do more of that. So I was like, right, of course, like we need that stuff in order to really understand what the characters are going through and identify with them. But I was not prepared for how emotionally difficult it was going to be. But also that like going through like reliving hard emotions is always difficult, but I sort of find that kind of the vulnerability that comes with hope and optimism is actually even a little bit harder. And particularly kind of after the heartbreak of the election, I was in a really closed off space. And the process of writing this book was a lot about me sort of reopening my heart to the idea of hope and of trusting in people and optimism. And that was, you know, really wonderful, but also a lot harder than I expected it to be.
Yeah. I mean, I do always think that like no one's going to laugh at something you write unless it makes you laugh. And probably no one's going to cry unless it makes you cry, which is
totally,
you know, when I wrote in coffee shops, made for some awkward moments. I mean, we've written together and it's just like, I do feel like I remember a couple writing it, we both be like cracking up at our own stuff, and probably people at Insomnia or wherever we were like, avoid that table.
Which good. We didn't want to sit with them.
No.
I did have there's one character in the book who I've always thought of in my head as Max Minghella, and Max Minghella, the actor, lives in my neighborhood. And so I was in the coffee shop on my corner writing a scene that was like a difficult scene about that character and like getting choked up about it. And Max Minghella sat down like right next to me. And I was just like, well, Los Angeles, here we all are.
But were you like, did I conjure you, Max Minghella? Like, are you here of your own volition? Like from whence you came, Max Minghella?
For the next couple of years. Do you want to talk about this thing that I'm working on? No.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So you released your book during COVID-19. So I assume that was really fun and really easy.
Yeah, totally. I didn't have meltdowns about it on a daily basis at all, ever. No, it was hard in a lot of ways. It was stressful, sort of from week to week, kind of not knowing if the world would still be here, if bookstores would be open, what we were going to, knowing, I had planned, there was a tour, there was a party, there were sort of a lot of, my family had made some plans and none of that really came to fruition. But then sort of when your plans have to get canceled, kind of the other things can happen. And so I, went to spend book launch with my cousins up in Santa Cruz, and they surprised me with a trip to Yosemite, which I had wanted to go do since I read your book, Amy and Roger, and I had never been. So that was really amazing. And my friend Sonia, who I think is in the virtual audience right now, pulled together this video with 85 of my friends and family and teachers reading lines from the book. And there were all these like really amazing special things. And then also being able to do these events, which, you and I live in Los Angeles and Vroman is in Los Angeles. So this event we probably could have done anyway, but to be able to do different events all over the country, sort of different author friends who we might not have been able to be in the same city, and have people from all over be able to join, that's been really amazing. So obviously I wouldn't wish these circumstances on anyone, but it's been like a lot of really special things have happened that I think maybe wouldn't have happened if we had done this the way we planned.
And I do have to say, this is sort of the best book to read right now. Like the books like this are the only books that I want to read right now. Like I picked up like a big like nonfiction thing the other day and was like, no, like I'm not going to do that. Like I want romance and humor and real emotion and like a propulsive story. And so I feel like this is the best kind of escape right now. Because it's
the
not
history of the CIA. Is that what you were reading?
Yes. So the book about Sneha's secret job as a spy. It's like, I feel like it's not escapism in a bad way, because I feel like this is really dealing with real issues. It's not like pretending nothing is wrong with the world, but it's escapism in the best way, because you can really like funnel yourself into this book and get lost in it, which is all we want right now. Like all I want is to like forget for a few hours what is happening, and this absolutely does that. So if you guys haven't bought it, just put it in there. Also, we're probably going to start taking questions in like 10 or 15 minutes. So if you haven't written a question, put it in there and we'll answer it. Okay, was there anything you mentioned the email. Was there anything else that sort of came into the book and surprised you? Like a character who showed up, or a twist that happened, or something that you were just like, where did that come from?
Totally. So when I first, and I'm going to do this in a non-spoilery way, but those of you who've read the book, I think will know who I'm talking about. So there was one of the men who I had intended to be the villain. He does this thing, this really shitty thing, and I had intended him to be the villain of the book. But the more I wrote him, he was so much fun, and he was so sexy, and there was so much about him that was interesting, and there was so much about him that pushed B as a person and pushed her to grow. And I really fell in love with him as I was writing him. And so my conception of him totally changed.
Oh, interesting.
And he became just like a lot more of a lovable character than I had intended him to be. And then sort of contra-wise, the character who I had intended to be sort of the romantic hero of the book, kind of the more I got to know him, the more I was like, this guy has some baggage and he has some issues and he has some insecurities, and they're going to be a real problem. Like they're going to cause some serious conflict in terms of his relationship with B, because he has serious problems with romance and trust, and with, as it turns out, being on reality television. And so like the two characters who I had thought would be kind of furthest apart from each other in terms of like who's the best and who's the worst, they both ended up being way, way closer to the middle in terms of being sort of more complicated human beings. So that was a real joy for me. And then the other thing that I didn't expect to be like my favorite thing in the book that turned out to be one of my favorite things in the book was the text thread with B's brothers, which you were actually, you were the person who was helping me brainstorm what was going to happen on that text thread. And like, my dad is the oldest of 4 brothers, and it was very much what our family is like. And Morgan and I just had like the best day, like texting back and forth, like all the ridiculous things that could happen on that text thread. And that turned out to be one of my very favorite things in the book.
The moment they all prank him, I feel like I had to set the book down because I was laughing so hard. And I feel like the ice cream, and it's like, my kid stole my phone. Like, so good. It's so good. And I also feel like we're on a text thread with our friends, and I feel like the more you're on group text threads, it's like you can't not put them in your books because they're so fun and they so have their own rhythm. And there's always the person who was like responding to something from 3 things earlier, and it's like, my Wi-Fi dropped out. I still have a thing to say. Like, it's such good comedy. But okay, let's really get serious now, Kate. I need to know,
I'm ready,
what B's favorite Taylor Swift album would be, and then what her favorite song off Folklore would be. And also your answers to these questions as well, not just your fictional heroine.
Well, I can't pick a favorite album. I can give you maybe a top 3. That's pushing it. But B's favorite album, I've had to think about this, and I think B's favorite would be Red, because B is all about sort of like big emotions and big transitions, and that's what that album is very much for me.
And plus the Begin Again music video that takes place in Paris.
You know, that B would stand. I
know.
Begin Again is one of my very favorite songs. Not God Tier though. Tier 1. Sonia and I just redid our whole giant ranking doc.
I need to be a part of this. Why am I not a part of this?
It's elaborate. I'll say that about it.
Because I'm just a casual fan. Like, you know.
Yeah, if you want to know what was happening at 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday night after we were all on the phone together, it was that document. And B's favorite off Folklore. Interesting.
Or song in general.
I think off Folklore, I think it would be August, because I think B is very much about that wistful looking back at a romance that you now understand wasn't actually good for you, but trying to sort of like recapture the joyous moments of it and like reframe it in a different way. So I think that would be a big one for her. It's also one of my favorites, although my favorite is Cardigan. Off the new album. But favorite albums overall, I would say like Speak Now and Reputation. So I'm just always going against the grain.
We're gonna have a fight about Red. Red's the best, and that's the answer. That's the correct
Red
answer.
is wonderful. I own Red on vinyl. I listen to it all the time. You'll never catch me saying a bad thing about any one of Taylor's albums. Red is your favorite?
It is my favorite. I think it was just a masterpiece, and I'm angry at the Grammys and at Daft Punk because it should have won. I mean, I'm angry at Daft Punk for a lot of reasons, but especially for that. We now have hashtag Justice for Reputation, hashtag No Speak Now erasures. Red is a masterpiece. So, I mean, a lot of people are going to
those are really important hashtags.
They are. This is very important. Before we go to the questions, 2 sort of final things. What is next for you that you can talk about?
That I can talk about. Well, I'm working on some TV and film projects, so that's exciting, although not as easy to do that and write another book at the same time as I would have anticipated. Why would I think that?
Why do you think you think it's hard to have 2 full-time jobs? That's weird, Kate.
I know. And I'm also like, I'm also doing political consulting. So of course, 3 months before a presidential election, I'm like taking a break from political consulting for the first time in the last decade. And I'm like, oh, I have so much time. But then I'm like, oh, actually, when you write all day, then you're like tired at the end of the day. Incredibly.
Well, I feel like we say this a lot, that like we're not welders, that like when you write, your head is your office, and like it's not like you can go, and if you're having a bad day, it's like it's not separate from your life. And like when your office is on fire, it's harder to work.
Yeah, and when you're sitting on Twitter all day being like, oh no, oh no, this topic, oh no, this topic, oh no, I need to make 20 more charitable donations. It's a little harder to write.
But are you working on a new book? Can you tell us anything about it, or is it?
I can't tell you anything about it, but I can tell you that I'm working on it.
Is the sequel going to be 2 to watch?
I did text my agent, and I was like, if we wanted to do like 2 to tango, 3 to crowd, we could do like a whole series of these, but I don't think that that's what's going to happen. I will say that I'm going to be the guest on one of Reality Steve's upcoming podcasts, and Reality Steve. So there's a little, Reality Steve is the most famous Bachelor blogger.
I didn't even know that. I do know that.
There's a little Easter egg in the book about a blogger named Reality Stefan. So Reality Steve and I did discuss that if there were to be a One to Watch sequel, it would be One to Watch to Reality Stefan. And Reality Stefan would be the next main squeeze in the book. So Steve is totally on board to consult. He says he's going to let me know what kinds of women should be in the cast, whatever. So, entirely possible that could happen.
Is the Steve Stefan reference like a deep Family Matters cut?
It also a little bit is, yeah. You're the first person who picks up on that. Because there was a draft of the book where the Reality Stefan character was like a little bit more of a runner, that he was like, the main producer of the show is named Lauren, and he was like her nemesis, like that was like a little runner in the book, and it was just too much, and we had to cut some things at some point. But he was sort of like this very suave, debonair sort of Stefan or Cal kind of a character. So yes, you are the first person to have noticed that.
That's amazing. I love it. And then, I'm back. And then what are you reading right now, watching, listening to? Like, what are your current pop culture obsessions or inspirations?
Well, the number one most important thing I've done in quarantine is rewatching Buffy the Vampire Slayer in its entirety with my friend Amy, who's never seen it before. So we watch and text all through it. And, when we can really go, it can really be 8 episodes a day of Buffy that are happening. But like, there's no show that has like spoken more deeply to my soul during quarantine than Buffy, and it's really what I've needed. But I'm also, like you, I'm doing some escapist reading. I've been reading some romances this summer. I just read Party of Two by Jasmine Guillory, which is sort of like a 2020 take on the American president with a senator and a lawyer, and it deals with issues of race and sort of what's happening right now, but it's still like, men are sending women cakes to seduce them, and like what could be bad in a world where that happens.
No hams? No hams?
Did you know that the dogwood is both a tree and a flower? Now we're just doing American president.
Everyone's just going to start leaving. Like all the people are going to start leaving this chat.
By the way, my parents, who the American President is like one of their 3 favorite movies of all time, have just in this quarantine for the first time started watching West Wing. And I'm like, how did it take you? But so I'll just get texts like, CJ had a root canal, like out of nowhere. And I'm like, shit, you guys, that's totally true. So that's what I'm watching Buffy, they're watching West Wing. That's how we're respectively dealing with
it's like a real 1999 vibe there with your family.
But I also, have you watched Babysitter's Club? I just finished watching.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's been good. Seen the last 2 because then when I see them, then it will be over because I'm crazy. And
no, I do that too. I still haven't seen the finale of The Leftovers. How many years has it been? I can't bear to do it.
I've never seen the last season of Lost, which some people would say is a good thing. But this was because it was back in the days when we had like real like DVRs, and it was like the season where they go back to the 70s, and I had like 4 episodes saved up
to watch. And then there was an electrical storm and we lost power. And so we lost all those episodes. And we were like not in the 70s before that had happened. And then I turned on to watch the next episode and we were in the 70s. And I was like, I might have to stop watching this. I don't know anything that's going on.
It actually feels very lost that there were like documents you were supposed to watch and then they disappeared off your device and never to be seen again.
Totally.
Okay.
It was the smoke monster.
It was the Dharma Initiative. Okay. Let's see what questions people have. Okay. Okay, the one that has the most votes is, what Taylor Swift song would you pick for the One to Watch soundtrack?
Oh, I did do this. I made a One to Watch soundtrack. It's on Spotify. You can listen to it. I can try and, I don't know if I'll be able to find the link and drop it in here, but I don't know how we can get it to you. If you search Kate Stayman-London, me on Spotify, the One to Watch playlist is there. But Cruel Summer was the first track on the
very nice
soundtrack, because I think it has that sort of big, I love you, ain't that the worst thing you've ever heard energy of like, it's wonderful, it's terrible, it's emotions, but it's a bop, it's like joy, but it's also pain, it's all the things at the same time, which I think is big One to Watch energy.
Perfect. It is big One to Watch energy. Big one to, was the playlist called something like One to Listen To?
Oh, someone found it. Great work, Sarah.
That's what I feel like the playlist should be called.
One to listen to. There is there's a wine guide that my friend Tia, who you also know, and I wrote called Wine to Watch. So if you need the wine pairing guide for all of the characters, that's also something that you can get.
Okay. Kate, would you cast B or any other character in the movie version?
Oh, B is actually someone who I think it would be so cool if she got to be played by someone who isn't famous already and who is maybe an awesome plus size actress who hasn't had the opportunity to play a leading role. I think that would be amazing. But I don't know if you guys have seen this video, but when Oscar Isaac was in Star Wars, there was this video that went around of Carrie Fisher slapping him in the face like 20 times in a row. It was like all the outtakes of her slapping him. And when I watched that video, I had like deep feelings that I felt like I needed to write about. So it ended up inspiring a scene in the book. But I since then have always thought of Oscar Isaac with a French accent as Luke.
You know, you could do one.
And it would be so good.
So good.
It was just it would be so good. That's my quarantine gift to you. Think about that. And I say in the book that Sam is the spitting image of Michael B. Jordan. And so that one would be A+ casting for me. And I mentioned Max Minghella. And I think if you've read it, you may be able to guess which character.
I feel like you have like a direct line into like Max Minghella's like psyche. So manifest this. Manifest Minghella. Manifest Max Minghella.
Hashtag manifest Minghella. Sonia, that's our new hashtag.
Okay. Do you want to pick the questions, Kate? Do you want me to keep picking the questions? I'm fine. Whatever.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just saw manifest Minghella in the comments there. You can pick. These are all so good.
These are all really good. Okay. Because Paris is a supporting character in this book, can you drop a favorite Paris travel tip, assuming travel will be back in like 2025?
Yeah, so my favorite Paris travel tip is a Morgan Paris travel tip, which is stay in the 10th arrondissement when you go there, which is Canal Saint-Martin, up a little north outside the city. And Morgan can talk about it too, but it's so beautiful. You feel like a local. There are like all the sort of quaint, amazing shops and boulangerie and like little cafes and everything you want. And you can be right on the water in a way that if you were to be on the water at the Seine, it would cost you $1 million and you'd be surrounded by tourists. So you get like that perfect experience. But then you have it in a much more local and Parisian way. Morgan, do you have more you want to add?
Yeah, I lived in Paris for a few months in 2012, and I rented 2 different apartments, and the first one was in the 10th, and I hadn't known a ton about it. Like, it was one of those things where a friend of mine who was in Paris was like, check out the 10th, and I was like, all right. And then I was like, what is this place? And then when I had to move for my second apartment, I was so sad to leave it because I loved the neighborhood so much. it's such a magical city. And from what I've heard, like there's very few tourists right now. And apparently the Parisians are thrilled. Like they finally have their city to themselves, which they never do. But it's one of those places I feel like this quarantine has just made you realize like how much, I mean, I always love to travel, but like how deeply I miss it. And I'm kind of like LAX, I take it back. Everything I ever said, I didn't mean it. I was mad. Like what I wouldn't give to go through LAX right now, which is like nothing, like to be sitting in an Uber in traffic, waiting to get up to the airport would be like the ideal.
That little loop
dream.
is the worst thing that's ever happened to anyone, but it's not worse than this.
I know.
I will also say, dear readers, if you are going to Paris and you want my big Google Doc of racks of like restaurants and bars and stuff that I have that I send to everyone I know who goes to Paris, just like find me on Twitter or Instagram. I'll send it to you.
Okay, we have a question from someone named Sonia. I don't know who that is. And it says, in what way do you most relate to B? How are you most different from her?
Oh, I think the thing that I relate to most about B is this notion that women have to project this really strong presence and sort of not always knowing how to reconcile that with sort of the inner hurts or insecurities that you might be experiencing or going through. And that's something that I think has been an ongoing struggle, but sort of the older you get, the more you're like, well, who cares if you all know that I'm having a bad day or feeling insecure or whatever, and it's totally okay to just talk about that. But I think especially in my early 20s being in politics, I started out in the labor movement where, I don't know, for those of you who may not know, I was often the only woman in the room and always the only woman under 30 in any room that I was in. And so there was just vulnerability was not a part of how I projected myself. I had to be so tough. And if they told a dirty joke, I told a dirtier one. And that was the only way to get my job done. And so sort of unlearning those things and being like, oh, right, now I'm just like a writer who lives in LA. And now it's just like, okay to be who you are. And also that you can be really powerful and really feminine at the same time. So sort of figuring out how to navigate that is what I relate most to about B. The way that we're most different, I think she is a little more fearless than I am in terms of people are like, what would you do if the Bachelor called and was like, you're going to be the star of the Bachelorette? I would be like, indeed, sir, I am not. I don't.
Really? You wouldn't do it?
I don't know. That sounds bad to me. I mean, see all the trolling B gets in the book? I don't think I would enjoy. I think I get
But also the fun stuff in the museum, Kate. Think of the Met.
Think of the Met. The Met and the Mets. That would be the ultimate.
There we go.
If you could go to the Metropolitan Museum, but then also see the Mets play. That would be the ultimate. And
also the Mets and the Max. Toss Miguel in there, and now we're talking.
Yeah. The Mets with the Max. Now we're talking. But I think B is a little better at that stuff than I am.
I don't know. I feel like if you got the call, you don't think you would do it?
I don't know. Chris Harrison, get at me. We'll talk about it. We'll see.
Okay. Let's see. In as much detail as possible, can you walk us through what the ideal Kate/Morgan writing day would look like?
Oh, we did it. We did it we went to Hogsmeade.
That's right. Oh my gosh. So Kate and I both had, because basically Universal Studios, a one-time visit costs the same as a yearly pass. It's like $5 more. And so we were both like, let's just get yearly passes. And then we would have writing dates at the Three Broomsticks in Hogsmeade. And it was like, people kept being like, are you serious? And I'm like, I'm absolutely serious. I've got my butterbeer. I've got my laptop, and then you can go on rides.
It was good wireless, and like it was totally, and you could sit, and like there was like nice music playing, and if you had to pee, Moaning Myrtle was there, and it was all extremely trans inclusive, and like all gender representations were welcomed and encouraged, and it was just like the most. Because like when you have the pass, every so often they'll email you to be like, "There's free parking on this Tuesday," and it's like some random Tuesday in January where it's like 60 degrees and cloudy, but that's great because it actually feels a little more Britain that way. And like we would just go and write the Three Broomsticks. It was
so good. And because most coffee shops, you can't have trouble with what you're writing and then go on a roller coaster and then come back to your document and you figured it out. Like, it's very rare that you can have that in a coffee shop. So it has that going for it.
Totally. Plus, if you're like, I need some alcohol. I need some fizzing whiz bees, some every flavor beans. All of that is available to you.
If at some point you say, I need a wand to finish this scene, you can do it.
I feel like it's too far from me to be able to reach, but my wand is in the deck.
But no, Kate and I have been having writing dates together for over a decade now, which is crazy.
True.
Yeah.
And only in the first 2 years did we make friends with a lot of dentists.
That's right.
where we went to film school.
I was about to say, don't even explain. Don't even explain why. Just leave it out there. No, when we went to film school, the cafe was really near the dental school. And so we would be writing and all these dentists would just suddenly be there. It was good times. Good times. Kate and I met in graduate school 11 years ago, which is bananas. I know.
So crazy.
I know. It really is. Okay. Oh, someone wants to know what your favorite memory is from the 2016 campaign.
Oh, there are so many. I had one.
Is it Stephen Colbert who showed your picture on national television? That's a big one.
That was a real not be moment for me when we did this blog post where it was like how to dress up as Hillary for Halloween, and I was one of them. And then she went on the Colbert Show, and he was like showing her the pictures of them going through, and then it was like, here's Kate on Stephen Colbert, and they're just talking about like this. And I was like, I'm gonna physically die.
No, it's amazing. It was so good. It was so good. I was like, that's my friend.
I was thinking a lot. I've been thinking a lot recently about the day she accepted the nomination, because that was 4 years ago, and it was also the day that I met Congressman Lewis. So I've been thinking about that a lot because he passed recently, and it was just like the most insane day of like, I was up in the balcony producing this interview with Congressman Lewis and Yara Shahidi, which was like extremely emotional and like a deeply wonderful thing. And like, meanwhile, Kristen Schaal from 30 Rock and Last Man on Earth, wonderful actress, she was there. She was hosting our live stream, and I was her writer producer. So she's like texting me joke pitches, and we're like texting back and forth while I'm with Congressman Lewis and Yara Shahidi, like talking about Black Lives Matter and like figuring out how we're going to get the message points across in that interview. And then I was like running downstairs. And then there's a story not a lot of people know, but so we were doing this live stream on the homepage of YouTube and like all over the internet that was hosted by Kristen Schaal, sort of taking you through like backstage at the convention. And so we were in the like bowels of the convention center, and it was actually as Kaiser Khan was giving his famous speech, was like right above us, and we were counting down to go live. We were hardwired in, and Secret Service comes in. They're like, we need you to clear the hallway. We were like, we can't clear the hallway. Like, we're literally counting down from 20 right now. And they were like, but we just need someone who has to come through. And we were like, we're here. This is what we're doing. And they were like, okay. And then Katy Perry and her entire entourage just walk into the hallway. And like Katy Perry draped her arm around Kristen Schaal. They were in my opening shot as we went live all over the internet. And it was just like, well, this is why you do things live. And then once we wrapped our shoot, I got to watch Hillary Clinton accept the nomination. So that was a pretty exceptional day.
That sounds like a pretty good day. It's a pretty good memory. Okay. What are your thoughts on the ongoing Bachelorette casting rumors? Also, what Bachelorette men inspired your own characters the most? I have lots of feelings about this, but I'm going to toss it to you.
So ongoing casting rumors, I will say, like, now that I know Reality Steve, I feel that his word is law, and it seems like what the rumors are true, and it's what's really happening. And I'm not going to say it here if any of you are averse to Bachelorette spoilers out here, but it seems like some crazy stuff has gone down. But I'm excited about it. I think the new person is going to be really good. I like her a lot. And I forgot, what was the second part of the question? Oh, the men from The Bachelor, or The Bachelorette. There's one, Eric Bigger from Rachel's season. I thought that he just had this like really pure and joyful energy, and he was like really getting to know himself as he was on TV. So that was one thing that I really, he was, you can see a little bit of Eric in the Sam character, although there are a lot of things about them that are really different. And then I was just talking with Sonia about this actually, how like Nick Viall, the little bit of like smugness of I'm not quite sure what I'm doing on this show, was something that I really I loved about him, particularly because like we all know what he was doing on that show. But I liked that attitude a lot. And I took a little of that energy for Asher.
Okay, excellent.
Nick also a great cameo for those of you who are looking for some cameo gifts. Nick, if you give him some specific direction, he can really come through, and he will tell you his favorite Taylor Swift song if you ask.
What is he running? What's his cameo rate?
Oh God, maybe he was like $70 or something, but I think he might be more now.
Okay.
I mean, the guy's been on so many seasons of The Bachelor at this point. You've got to amortize it.
Okay, I think this is probably we only have time for one last question. For Kate and Morgan, what are the next writing projects on your horizon? You kind of answered that. Can you talk any more about your next novel, or is it still all under wraps?
No, it is all under wraps. But I can say that there may be, we're working on the notion of a film or TV version of One to Watch. So that is on the horizon. Fingers crossed, we hope. So we'll see what happens with that.
That's super exciting. And I have a book coming out in May called Take Me Home Tonight.
I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. So who knows what May will look like? I hope that I'll be able to do events and tour. But who knows? It's a fun world. So we're not sure about that. But the book is coming out on May 4th. It's coming out on Star Wars Day.
Yay!
So no, it's exciting to have a release date. Okay. Maybe one last question. Who was your favorite Bachelorette? Trista Sutter, going way back.
Oh, well, Trista's the OG, and as Chris Harrison refers to her, the godmother of the franchise. But I would say my favorite Bachelorette is Rachel Lindsay, just because she is the GOAT. She's amazing. And also Peter, my number one hottest guy who's ever been on The Bachelorette. But I think my favorite season is Caitlin Bristow's season, because that season was just like so many great men were in that season. Ben Higgins was in that season. Rhode Island Jared was in that season. But then also famous Nick Viall, who Morgan knows so well.
So well.
When he showed up in the middle of the season, all the men were like such little whiny jerks about it. And like, I always say that like people who think that women are more emotional than men have clearly never seen a season of The Bachelorette, because you need only watch one. So Caitlin's season was the craziest and the best in my opinion, but also a special shout out to Ashley Haber's season, because that season was sort of the closest to One to Watch in terms of Ashley really dealt with a lot of her insecurities right there on television, and it was incredibly compelling. And so she's probably the closest to be, despite being very, very, very tiny and thin.
And do you have any sense that The Bachelorette or The Bachelor might be doing more size inclusive casting? Is that anything that seems to be
I have no sense of that. No, I would be very, very surprised. I mean, I think anything's possible, but I think when we're literally still working on like having just not everyone be like white, thin, cis, and straight, like where I think we have a ways to go before we're going to see any body diversity on that show. But I do think like looking at the success of shows like Love is Blind or Too Hot to Handle on Netflix, like I think that there is an opportunity for another show to come in and like create that more inclusive audience, and maybe Bachelor a little bit that way by creating more competition. So that would be my hope, is that, if The Bachelor is not going to do it, that maybe some other show will. Yeah,
I mean, it just seems kind of like it's a space that's open. And have you been able to get one of these books into Chris Harrison's hands? That's the...
No, I haven't. But I mean, people are posting on Instagram every day, and I love them. I see all the posts. But people are often tagging Chris Harrison.
Good.
And I imagine he gets tagged in a lot of shit, but I hope that he or his social media person or whoever does that is like, I wonder what this is about. So,
someone should tag, because the epigraph is a Chris Harrison quote and Shakespeare. And that's probably the first time he's ever been, with Shakespeare that's ever been like, let's talk about those two people at the same time. So I feel like if someone took a picture of this and tagged him in it, he might be like, wait, what is this book? I must read it. So someone do that.
The epigraph, that was Sonia's idea. And also for you 53 people watching, on the back of the book where it says real love as seen on TV, that tagline, one Ms. Morgan Matson came up with that wonderful one that's on every single book. So that's my advice to everyone who wants to be a writer. Have a lot of really, really, really smart, wonderful, generous friends who will help make your book better. That's the best.
No, it was so fantastic. It was very easy to come up with a tagline who was just as good as the book. So I think we might be out of time. But this was so awesome. I will encourage everyone to purchase a copy of One to Watch if you haven't already. And if you have already, buy another one. and send it to one of your friends because we need to support the post office. And it's being really nice quarantine gift right now. So
my first job out of college was with the Letter Carriers Union, which is your mailman's union, one of 7 different postal unions. If we wanted to do a whole other event just about like postal reform and issues, we could do that too. It would probably not be as interesting.
Kate, that should be your next book. It could be called like Signed, Sealed, Delivered, or You've Got Mail, but MALE.
Oh, so hetero.
You've got female. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Letter love.
Yeah. There's a lot there. I feel like no one's done a postal rom-com.
It's hard to believe that no one.
And to that, Kate says, "Challenge accepted. Challenge accepted." But anyway, this was awesome. Thank you everyone for coming, and this was super fun.
So much fun.
Oh,
there's Max.
There's Max.
Hello. Kate, Morgan, thank you so much. That was really fun to listen to. And I agree, personally. I think Red is the best Taylor Swift album.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm turning into a real pile-on.
I just grew up, and that was the first one that really caught my ear. And I was like, I like Taylor Swift now. It's catchy.
Reputation.
Again, thank you so much. If you'd like to support Vroman's and Kate, you can go ahead and buy her book by clicking the link down there. Thank you to everyone in the audience so much for coming out tonight. And once again, thank you, Kate and Morgan. You two were awesome.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.